Summative feedback evaluation. The first question I asked was how old they thought my target audience was. 15 to 18 is younger teenagers are becoming less and less shocked by horror content, and then 47 says 15 to 18 and above as younger viewers are increasingly less afraid of gore. Bill, 54. This helped me as I was afraid that I'd in fact included too much horror content to stop it from being a 15 anymore, and I still think that might be the case. But upon hearing, even from younger viewers, Oliver, 14, that late teens and 15 to 21 seems to be the target audience, and the majority of the consensus was that it was in fact for 15 and above, it made me feel much more sound and realise that nowadays it's becoming less and less of a shock factor to see horror content for young groups, and in fact it'll often make a sort of event of it, gathering around to watch horror films, to get the adrenaline, almost to feel kind of rebellious and grown up. So it appeals to that. The second question I asked was if they thought the colour scheme of red, black and white was effective. Alice used it so heavily throughout as one of the main things to tie them together. Alice, 18, says the colour scheme is very effective for the horror genre. The red is striking on both the poster and the cover, which is something that I aimed it to be. This is then agreed by Grace, age 17, and who says that there is a good contrast. I wanted this to occur as the red would stand out against the white and the black, quite common monotonous colours, but it would then just highlight the kind of sharpness and single out the red much more, which, as Helena says, suggests blood and darkness when compared to the dark background. So it was key that the red stood out as I had the text on it as well. The third question I asked was if they thought the red tint on the trailer worked. A lot of this was aimed to be a link between the three of my products, and I wanted to know that it didn't seem too obscure or wasn't too hard to kind of, like, it impaired the watching too much. Quite a lot of people said that they didn't actually notice the tint very much. That in fact, I could have done it heavier, which I could have done it. Maybe I did do it a little bit safe with it, and I could have really gone further to kind of make it stand out more. But for those that did see it, they said that it did link the trailer to the poster and magazine cover well, and then it actually tied in with the blood and gore, so linked to the horror genre. I then asked what genre they believed the product was. The majority of answer here was simple and mainly said horror or supernatural horror. That seemed to be the general consensus, which was good for me as that was what I aimed it to be. So I'm glad that I successfully managed to put across conventions that were used in this genre, so it was recognisable as it. There were some that could have believed it was a psychological horror, which is kind of a similar branch, but obviously not what I was going for, but we had here, as it says, that it could have been a supernatural or psychological, as it played on the mind as well. But that's good. I seem to have created a emotive response in my viewers, which was a thing that I aimed to do as well. I just maybe could have emphasised the kind of supernatural aspects of it more, the things that kind of made it inhuman. Question 5 was if they thought the font choice was effective. I had many that said that the colour of it made it stand out. So again, the colour scheme was helpful with the red. That it was kind of linked to the genre. But I also had some that had criticism. So Alice, 18, says that the font choice of the film and trade doesn't fit with the detail of the background, as the red is overpowering. Which I have to agree, the kind of grey background for the trailer, when contrasted with the red, was a bit... the white kind of would work with it better, but I unfortunately only had access to the kind of grey from my mobile iMovie app. But I do think that they're not too complementary with each other. The kind of grey, the dirty grey and the bright red, it seems out of place. I wanted to know then if the magazine or the poster was preferred. I thought this because I was almost worried that it seemed I could have put more effort into one than the other, or that they kind of didn't seem to go well together. I wanted to know if it seemed that one was carrying the other or something, there was anything obvious that I'd done wrong. But it actually seemed that it was pretty split half and half. that half the group liked the poster and half of them liked the magazine, which I was glad about, as I didn't want there to be one that was obviously better than the other. So it wasn't really on par with one another. They didn't fit together in quality. And I also wanted to know why they picked it, what the things that were done that I did most successful in the print products. So it seems that many believed the manipulation was good. So like Alice says, the manipulation of the eye shows being alive and being possessed in the poster. So it showed that it created meaning. And Joanna believes the magazine is better because there's a better use of space, which is something that I feel is definitely a fair problem with the poster, that there's quite a lot of blank space, as I kind of wanted to save space for writing and then maybe just thought there would be more writing there. But here we have that Ellen says the white background was in fact a successful part of it, as the red stood out. But she does say that the magazine should be less cartoon-like, which I suppose, as I've said before with my audience, not many know the kind of little white lies, how they try to convey it. So that actually the cartoon and heavy editing and things like that is a common convention of little white lies. So I think the cartoon thing was still relevant there, but I think maybe my audience haven't really heard of that so much. It shows that the idea of the cartoon-like is actually a defiance on conventions, as they seem to expect it to be a sharp picture, when in fact I did something different here, and the audience are kind of maybe not so open to comprehending that, to the big change. I also wanted to know if the actual poster and magazine had been successful in what they were aiming to be. You know, the posters and magazines are meant to catch attention of potential viewers, to draw them in and make them interested in the film. So I was glad to see that the effect of the eye seems to draw people in, because the eye was something I wanted to use, as the eye brings direct mode of address, which can kind of seem more personal to the reader. But it seems that, again, with the poster, the white seemed to be the problem, that the kind of blank space means that it makes it a little more boring, it's easier to walk past with all the white. So I had tried other colours, but it seemed that was most successful, but maybe I could have made the eye bigger and more central to cut out some of the white and emphasise the eye more. I then asked also if the magazine would grab the attention. It seemed that this seemed to be that yes, it would. Obviously the kind of obscureness, that how strange it is that its cartoons seem to work, and people seem to agree that the dark background, as Joanna says, is more appropriate for the genre. So maybe I should have stuck with the kind of black instead of the white. But it seemed that many could guess that the kind of dark, the blood and things, it was for a horror genre, but some might have found it, again, kind of strange that it was edited like that. So it was harder to tell and harder to comprehend, but I'm glad to see that it made Lynn want to learn more about it. So again, maybe the strange editing actually made people more curious, and that would make them want to watch the film more. Finally, I of course wanted to know if they'd actually want to see the film, that if it had been successful to them. The majority actually said yes, that they would, which was good. I was glad that it appealed to them, but the kind of general thing was that they wouldn't see it as it seemed too scary, which I'm glad to see that I'd obviously put enough horror content in. In a sense, that's I'm quite glad to see that it fit well with the horror genre, enough to actually kind of scare people. But I also wanted to know that it wasn't too scary for the target audience I had. So Oliver, who's aged 14, said that they would actually see it, but it was the kind of narrative that put them off more, not the horror content. So I'm glad to know that I didn't make it too scary and too gory. So, but then they said that the narrative was actually slightly less original, which I have to agree with. I do think that there could have been more depth with sort of the narrative's a bit cliched with the kind of group of people, and I do think that I perhaps could have focused more on making a more interesting narrative instead of just creating the final outcome. But I'm glad to know that the trailer itself leaves enigmas for Helena, aged 18. So I think that overall there are obviously areas I could have worked on, but it's been successful.